Hot air balloons look calm and quiet from the outside, but when things go wrong, there's no way to steer, no way to stop, and no way out. In this video, we'll look at 5 real disasters caught on camera. Moments when peaceful flights turned into deadly falls, explosions, and fire. These are the deadliest hot air balloon crashes ever recorded, and the stories behind them are as terrifying as they are real. It was February 26, 2013. In Luxor, Egypt. Early that morning, 21 people boarded a hot air balloon for what was supposed to be a peaceful and scenic ride over the Valley of the Kings. The flight, known as SU-283, was run by a company called Sky Cruise. The trip would pass famous landmarks like the Colossi of Memnon and the statues of Naga Alakalta, a breathtaking route meant to be the highlight of the tourist's vacation. The passengers came from around the world. Among them were Michael Rennie, 49, and his wife Yvonne, 48, from Perth, Scotland. Others were from France, Hungary, China, Japan, and the United Kingdom. Everyone on board was expecting a calm, unforgettable experience, and it would be unforgettable, but for the worst reasons. At 6:15 a.m., the balloon lifted off under clear skies. Everything seemed normal. People took photos and quietly admired the view. But about 5 miles into the flight, something went wrong. As the balloon descended toward a sugarcane field, Captain Momin Murad, 30, contacted his ground crew and dropped a thick rope known as the drop line to help guide the landing. The basket was just 10 feet from the ground when suddenly a flash of fire erupted. A gas hose connected to one of the burners had developed a leak. That hose, installed in 2005, failed just as the balloon neared the ground. The pressurized gas made contact with the flame and caused a sudden burst of fire. Captain Murad was hit first, suffering burns across most of his body. In pain and panic, he jumped out of the basket. Michael Rennie, seated at the back, followed, jumping 10 feet to the ground and somehow escaping without injury. The rest of the scene was chaos. The ground crew ran in. Some tried to hold on to the drop line to stabilize the basket. Others rushed to help the captain. But in that confusion, the balloon drifted back up, still on fire, with 19 people trapped inside. Witnesses said people were screaming. A few made the desperate decision to jump. Reports say as many as 8 people leapt from the balloon, landing in the fields below. Sadly, none survived. The fire quickly grew worse. Investigators later said the heat weakened the fabric of the balloon, which began breaking apart. The balloon floated nearly 1,000 feet before it finally exploded in the air. A loud blast echoed across the area. Black smoke rose from where the balloon came crashing down into a wheat field, leaving a deep pit behind. Michael Rennie, now on the ground, ran toward nearby homes shouting for help. He had watched the entire disaster unfold, from the fire to the explosion. Doctors later called his survival a miracle. He had no physical injuries but was emotionally devastated. He refused visitors and spoke only of his wife. Yvonne, a hospital receptionist back in Perth, was remembered as kind and full of life. Her body, like the others, was severely burned, making identification difficult. Other victims included London artist Joe Bampton and his partner Susanna Gietvai. Both were known for being quiet and kind. In total, 19 lives were lost. Only Michael and Captain Murad survived, though the captain was in critical condition. The Egyptian Civil Aviation Authority launched a full investigation. Their final report pointed to a leak in a worn-out fuel hose that hadn't been replaced since 2005. They also found several safety failures. Murad didn't inform air traffic control of his takeoff and skipped key pre-flight checks. He later said he didn't think it was his responsibility to inspect the hose area. Authorities reviewed dozens of videos from the scene, some showing the balloon in flames, others showing what remained in the field. All hot air balloon flights in Luxor were suspended after the crash. Sky Cruise had faced issues before. In 2011, one of their balloons crashed into the Nile. That time, no one was hurt and no major actions were taken. This time, both the pilot and the maintenance engineer faced legal consequences for their role. While official updates have been limited, the case is still moving forward. Michael Rennie returned to the United Kingdom shortly after. In a brief statement, he said that Yvonne was his world. He also sent his thoughts to the other families affected by the tragedy. As of now, the case remains open. It was the early morning of August 13, 1989, just outside Alice Springs in Australia's Northern Territory. The skies were clear, and the sun had just started to rise. 4 hot air balloons carrying excited tourists were taking off from Santa Teresa Road, about 29 kilometers from the town. Among them was one balloon carrying 12 passengers and a pilot, 13 people in total. Most were Australian. One was a Danish tourist named Preben Jacobsonen. Another was an Italian man living in Monaco. They were about to take part in what should have been a peaceful sunrise flight, but it at 6:38 a.m., something went terribly wrong. Alan Fraser, one of the pilots, was flying a balloon that started to rise faster than expected. Above him was another balloon piloted by Michael Sanby. Both worked for the same company, Toddy's Balloon Safaris, and were part of the same tour. As Fraser's balloon climbed, it collided with the underside of Sanby's balloon. The top of Fraser's balloon, called the envelope, was pushed into the basket of the one above. Then came a loud tear. The lower balloon had been ripped open. Witnesses described the tear as being the size of a bedsheet. From the other balloons, people watched as the damaged balloon hovered for a few seconds. It drifted slightly, but it was clear something was wrong. A tourist described what they saw. One balloon was rising too quickly and collided with the other. The lower balloon touched the basket above it, shook violently, and then started drifting away. It didn't drop right away. It moved slowly at first, but it was clearly in distress. From the ground, people watched silently. Alan Fraser tried to save the balloon by adding more heat, but it was no use. The tear was too big. Witnesses said the balloon folded and fell like a streamer. The fall lasted 51 seconds. That's how long everyone on board had to realize there was no way out. The balloon hit the ground about 16 kilometers from Alice Springs Airport. Fraser had turned off the burners before impact, likely to avoid a fire. But the speed of the crash made survival impossible. All 13 people died. 10 of the bodies were found in the basket, holding on to each other. 3 were found nearby in the sand. One rescue worker, Kezia Purick, believed that some individuals might have jumped, thinking they had a better chance of survival. There were a few bodies found away from the basket, which suggested they may have jumped in an attempt to escape. Those in the other balloons were shaken. A German tourist said they all prayed for the people in the falling balloon and landed far from the crash site. Rescue teams arrived quickly, but there was nothing they could do. The investigation revealed serious mistakes. Though both pilots had radios, they never spoke to each other. Sanby's balloon didn't have the required instruments for tracking altitude. He also didn't follow safety protocols, even though the company's manual said the upper balloon should always give way. Fraser was also found at fault for ascending too close without checking the position of the other balloon. Investigators concluded the crash was due to mistakes made by both pilots. The coroner, Dennis Barrett, said Sanby acted with serious negligence. Sanby was charged with 13 counts of manslaughter. He had borrowed over $1 million to grow his business and was trying to leave the country when police arrested him. The trial in 1992 lasted 13 weeks. Sanby was found not guilty of manslaughter, but was convicted of a lesser charge related to endangering lives. He was sentenced to 2 years but served less than that after his conviction was overturned on appeal. The crash led to tighter ballooning regulations across Australia. As of 2023, this remains the deadliest ballooning disaster in Australian history and the third deadliest worldwide. It wasn't the weather, it wasn't the equipment, it was a mistake, one that couldn't be undone. It was July 30th, 2016 in Lockhart, Texas, about 30 miles south of Austin. 16 people had gathered early that morning for what was supposed to be a quiet, scenic ride in a hot air balloon. The flight was run by Heart of Texas Hot Air Balloon Rides and led by its 49-year-old owner and pilot, Alfred "Skip" Nichols. Many of the passengers were there to celebrate something special. Paige Brabson had surprised her mom, Laura Lee, with the ride as a late Mother's Day gift. Matt and Sunday Rowan were newlyweds. This was Sunday's birthday present to Matt. Others were marking anniversaries, birthdays, or just looking for a unique experience. At 6:58 a.m., the balloon took off from Fentress Air Park. The sky was cloudy and overcast. Visibility was poor with a low cloud ceiling of about 1,100 feet. Nichols had checked weather reports 2 hours before launch. They showed fog and low clouds. Other balloon operators had canceled their flights. Nichols didn't. The balloon, a Czech-made Baloney Kubitschek BB-85Z, was large and strong, designed for carrying many people. But just 26 minutes after takeoff, things went terribly wrong. As the balloon drifted south over Maxwell, a small rural area, it began to descend. At 7:42 a.m., locals heard 2 loud pops. One woman, Margaret Wiley, thought it sounded like gunshots. When she looked outside, she saw a fireball rising into the sky. The balloon had struck high-voltage power lines. The lines cut through the balloon's envelope, the fabric that holds hot air, and ignited the propane tanks. The flames quickly engulfed the basket and everyone inside. The envelope detached and floated nearly 3/4 of a mile away. The basket dropped straight down into a field, still burning. At 7:44 a.m., a 911 call reported what the caller thought was a vehicle fire. First responders arrived to find the wreckage. All 16 people on board had died. What they found was devastating. The basket had been reduced to metal and ashes. The power lines were large industrial lines, and the fire had reached 4 stories high. Investigators found the remains in and around the crash site badly burned. It took days to identify the victims. Authorities worked with the Federal Bureau of Investigation to gather evidence from 14 personal devices at the scene, hoping to understand what happened during the flight. Nichols had over 20 years of balloon flying experience and previously ran another company in Missouri. People in the industry saw him as skilled, but his background told a different story. He had multiple convictions for impaired driving and had served time in jail. Despite this, he was allowed to fly because at the time, balloon pilots didn't need medical clearance. No physical exams, no evaluations, nothing to stop someone with a risky background from taking passengers into the air. Toxicology reports later showed Nichols had several substances in his system that could slow reaction time and affect judgment. Investigators said his decisions that day showed a clear lack of caution. He flew in poor weather, continued into fog with low visibility, and descended into a dangerous area. The crash took the lives of people from all walks of life. Couples like Brian and Tressie Neal, Joe and Tressa Owens, and Matt and Sunday Rowan. Families like the Brabsons and the Douglases. All of them had plans. All of them were gone in seconds. The crash led to urgent questions. Why were balloon pilots not held to the same safety standards as other commercial pilots? Why were earlier warnings ignored? Back in 2014, the National Transportation Safety Board had warned the Federal Aviation Administration about this exact risk. They asked for stricter rules for balloon pilots, including medical checks. The Federal Aviation Administration declined, saying ballooning wasn't high risk. That belief changed after this tragedy. Heart of Texas hot air balloon rides shut down 2 days later and never reopened. In 2017 and 2018, lawmakers pushed for stronger regulations. But real change didn't happen until 2022, 6 years later. That's when the Federal Aviation Administration finally required commercial balloon pilots to pass medical exams. 16 lives were lost in the deadliest hot air balloon crash in the history of the United States, and all because safety rules hadn't caught up to reality. It was January 7, 2012 in Carterton, a quiet town in Wairarapa, New Zealand. The weather was clear and calm, ideal for a hot air balloon flight. On board the balloon that morning were 10 passengers and their pilot, Lance Hopping, one of New Zealand's most experienced balloon pilots. But within an hour, what began as a peaceful flight would end in one of the country's worst air disasters. Lance Hopping had over 10,000 hours of flight experience. He was also a safety officer for the Balloons Over Wairarapa Festival. The balloon, named Mr. Big, was a Cameron A210 model made in 1997 and brought to New Zealand in 2001. The basket and burner were older, dating back to 1989, but still approved for flight. That morning, the balloon launched at 6:38 a.m. The passengers were locals, 2 married couples, 2 cousins, a young couple, and 2 others. Their families followed on the ground in chase vehicles, ready to help with the landing. For most of the 45-minute flight, everything seemed fine. The balloon drifted gently over Carterton, following a calm path. But around 7:20 a.m., as it neared Somerset Road, things changed. Hopping radioed the ground team, saying he planned to land near the road, but as the balloon moved lower, it drifted toward a set of 33,000-volt power lines. Witnesses later said they heard the pilot yell, "Duck down," just before the balloon hit the wires. One line caught on the basket. Hopping tried to pull the balloon higher, but the wire held it. For about 20 seconds, the balloon dragged along the wire. Then an electrical arc sparked, setting the balloon on fire. The flames spread fast. Witnesses saw black smoke pouring into the air. In panic, 2 passengers jumped from the basket, falling 20 meters. They didn't survive. The balloon, still burning, started rising, but the tension from the wire caused it to snap. Now free, the balloon shot upward, still on fire. Moments later, the envelope collapsed and the balloon fell to the ground from about 150 meters high. All 11 people died at the scene. Emergency teams arrived within minutes, but there was nothing they could do. The wreckage landed in a field 600 meters from the main road. It took 2 days to recover the remains. The site was secured, and the balloon parts were sent to Wellington for investigation. Power was knocked out for about 3,800 homes in the area, but was restored soon after. The crash launched a major investigation by the Transport Accident Investigation Commission, or TAIC. It was New Zealand's worst air accident since 1979. By February 2012, the Transport Accident Investigation Commission had already found problems with the balloon's maintenance. Records were incomplete, some safety procedures were outdated, and key checks had been missed. The company maintaining the balloon had used an old manual from 1992 and didn't test the materials properly. These issues didn't cause the crash, but showed serious gaps in oversight. Toxicology reports later showed Lance Hopping had tetrahydrocannabinol in his system. Though it wasn't clear when he last used it, multiple people said he was a regular user. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission suggested this may have affected his decisions that day. The final report confirmed that Hopping made a critical error. He could have used the balloon's emergency system to land quickly, but chose to rise instead. His pilot license had also expired 6 weeks before the crash. He wasn't legally allowed to fly. In 2013, it was revealed that passengers were never told how to use the balloon's emergency controls. These could have helped reduce the impact. Coroner Peter Ryan called the crash entirely preventable. He recommended better enforcement, random substance testing, and possibly having a second pilot on flights. In 2015, 4 photos taken during the crash were released to the public. The images showed the exact moment the balloon struck the wires, caught fire, and fell. Though difficult to see, families supported their release, hoping it would lead to improved safety. The victims included Hopping and 10 passengers, many of whom had family watching from the ground. The crash shocked the country and led to major changes in how balloon flights are handled in New Zealand. It was April 1, 2023, just north of Mexico City. In the early morning, hot air balloons rose quietly over Teotihuacan, a popular spot for tourists hoping to see the ancient pyramids from above. Among them was a family celebrating a birthday, a day that should have been joyful but quickly turned into something much worse. Jose Nolasco, 50, his wife Viridiana Becerril, 39, and their young daughter Regina Itzani had traveled from Coajimalpa de Morelos. Jose and Regina had planned a surprise for Viridiana's birthday, a balloon ride over the pyramids of the sun and moon. The family smiled for a photo before boarding. It would be one of their final moments together. Not long after the balloon lifted off, witnesses began recording what became a horrifying scene. Smoke poured from the basket. A fire had broken out and quickly spread, engulfing the bottom of the gondola. One bystander was heard exclaiming in disbelief as people fell from the balloon, while another voice, believed to be Jose, was heard calling for help. Inside the balloon, passengers were forced to act fast. Regina jumped. She fell over 130 feet. Somehow she survived, though she broke her arm and suffered burns. She had hugged her parents before jumping. At the time, she didn't know they wouldn't survive. A second person was also seen falling from the basket, though it's unclear who that was. The pilot, Victor Guzman, jumped from only 16 feet and survived with minor injuries. He fled the scene. Authorities soon arrived. The balloon had crashed near the base of Teotihuacan. Debris, charred remains of the basket, and the bodies of Jose and Viridiana were found on site. Police placed tarps over the scene as investigations began. Regina was rushed to the hospital. She was in serious condition but stable. Her grandmother, Reina Gloria Sarmiento, later told reporters that the ride was a birthday gift for her daughter. Through tears, she said Regina had not yet been told what had happened to her parents. Pilot Victor Guzman was later found and arrested. He admitted he panicked and didn't know how to react. Instead of helping, he saved himself and ran. His actions have been widely criticized. Investigators are now looking into the company that operated the balloon, Auto Cinema Retroviso. The Federal Aviation Agency is checking if the company had a proper license, insurance, and safe equipment. Early reports suggest a possible failure in the balloon's fuel system may have caused the fire. Footage also shows the balloon might have still been tethered when the fire started, raising more questions. There's no confirmation yet on whether safety checks were done before the flight or if the pilot was certified. The company has not made any public statement. Teotihuacan is one of Mexico's most historic sites, once home to over 100,000 people. Balloon rides over the site are usually seen as peaceful. Fatal balloon incidents are rare. Between 2000 and 2016, there were only 21 recorded deaths. Still, just a week earlier, another balloon accident occurred in China. That balloon crashed into a lake, but everyone survived. The contrast only adds to the frustration around what happened in Mexico. Regina is still recovering. Physically, she may heal, but emotionally, her journey will be far harder. Her family, her home, and the meaning of her mother's birthday have been changed forever. What started as a surprise became a nightmare. A family's day of celebration ended in tragedy, leaving behind unanswered questions and a young girl facing a life changed forever.